Is it going?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Who printed out the review sheet? Anybody? Okay. Can I have it just to show the review sheet? Do you have it on you?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. So those of you that are watching this on YouTube, this sheet right here is the review sheet. So I would check this out. This will help you the most. This video obviously, and then the end of the chapter review pages. Those should help you kind of summarize your thoughts. So those are the ones that, for example, this one on page 34, 35 looks like this. So there's one of these for every chapter. 1 through 5 is what this test is on. I would check those out especially, okay? So hands down, the most important thing you need to do in sociology class is to be able to apply theories to real-world situations. Apply theories and concepts to real-world situations. You guys are all good students. I'm not worried about you memorizing the terminology and all that. I'll still go through some of that, but I want to spend most of the time now applying situations, okay? So first of all, let's start with the 3 main theoretical approaches in sociology. What are the 3 main theoretical approaches? Yeah.
SI theory, conflict theory,
Functionalism. Yep. SI theory, conflict theory, and functionalism are the 3 main ones. In addition to being called functionalism, functionalism is also called the structural functional approach. Conflict theory is also called the social conflict approach, and then SI theory is short for symbolic interactionism. So if you look at the names, that can help you to understand like what each theory is about. All right. Another way to break the theories down is to understand what perspective they use to analyze society. The way that they use that terminology is macro and micro, which is a terminology that they'll use in economics as well. So, which 2 theories are macro level perspectives? Brittany.
Functionalism and conflict.
Functionalism and conflict theory are the 2 macro approaches. Which one's the micro approach? Spencer? SI theory. Okay. So what does macro versus micro mean, basically? Who can explain that? Nolan.
Macro is on a wider scale, and micro is more in-depth and personal, I guess. So it's more like just the scale is it's closer looking at things.
Yeah. Macro is, another way to look at this is macro is a top-down approach. Micro is a bottom-up approach. Okay? So, if, for example, you were to see a scenario where it was analyzing like how big decisions in the economy or in the government affect people's lives, you know that that would be either micro or macro. Which one is it? Big top-down decisions, macro, okay? If you're looking at how collectively the actions of individuals shape something, then what would that be? Okay, micro. So let's use the economy as an example. If they do an ad campaign and they interview a whole bunch of people and ask them, what did you think about this product? Or what were your friends saying when they were thinking about this product? If that's the focus, what did people think about the product? Is that macro or micro? Micro. Okay? If, however, the government does something, like the Fed does something to modify interest rates, and that leads to individuals taking out more loans or whatever, what perspective is that? Macro. Okay? So you understand the difference? Okay. Now let's break down each theory individually. Functionalism. Functionalism holds what's the key thing in functionalism? What's the key thing it believes? JJ.
In what?
Functionalism.
That like everything is based off of one big thing, and in order for the little things to work, the big thing needs to work.
And that big thing is what to functionalism?
Society.
Society. Okay. So the book definition for functionalism is something like a viewpoint that sees society as a system of interrelated parts that promotes solidarity and stability. So another thing that'll help you on the test is if you look for like key words, like anytime obviously it would say conflict, power, struggle, inequality, etc. What theory is that referencing? Conflict theory. If it says solidarity, stability, function, obviously, what's it referring to? Functionalism. And if it says symbols, Micro, creating meaning out of situations. Perception, what's that referring to? SI theory. Okay, good. All right, in functionalism specifically, there's a number of terminologies that we'll use to try to understand that. Two of the main terminologies you'll see are manifest function and latent function. Manifest function and latent function, okay? So the prime example that I gave in class about the difference between manifest and latent functions had to do with colleges or education in general. So when we look at like the function of education, what purpose, what role does it play in society? What does it do? What's the stated function of education?
Gives people knowledge.
Okay. Okay, to educate, be more specific.
To train for jobs.
Okay, to train the workforce, to well-rounded citizens, get people functioning in society, all of that. Would that be manifest functions? Socialization's a good one. Would that be a manifest function or a latent function? The three that I just gave you. Manifest, because it's the stated intended consequence of it. Okay? If it's an unintended consequence of something, what's that called? A latent function. Yeah.
Thanks for coming in tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
I just haven't killed the music.
Okay. Yeah, you know, my wife and I will eat here on Sundays sometimes, and I figured this is a good place to kind of host these. So we do four big tests a year, so we usually do a review session. Yep.
All there for you guys to use.
Okay. Sounds good. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so in education, the manifest functions are socialization, preparing a workforce, getting people ready to be citizens, providing people with a well-rounded background and knowledge, all that stuff. What are some of the latent functions of education? Hannah.
Place to go during the day.
Okay, it's a place to go during the day. Okay. What else? Cole. Gives people a place to interact socially. If you look at colleges, they provide a lot of like matchmaking services.
Yeah, I was going to say like
That's what you're gonna say?
meeting a wife or something.
Meeting significant others. Okay, good. So those would be latent functions. Are latent functions always bad?
No.
No, but latent functions can be bad. Manifest functions could be bad also. The mob, for example. Okay? What's the stated purpose of like the mafia? To make cash through crime. Okay? So that's the stated purpose. That would be a manifest function, but it's considered morally bad by most people, right? Whereas some latent functions could be bad or could be good. It doesn't matter. So don't think good or bad. Think intended or unintended consequence. Now, what's the third terminology that we use related to functionalism?
Social dysfunction.
Social dysfunction. That's something that makes society not function as well. Okay? It disrupts something operating in society. Okay, who are some of the key theorists for functionalism?
Robert Merton.
Merton. Who's the guy that coined the term sociology? Comte. So that's the functionalist approach. Durkheim, and then Spencer. Spencer is the one that really emphasized the manifest and latent. And he also used the analogy of society being an organism. If you remember Durkheim was one of the first people to identify how social forces influence people's decisions. What specific action did Durkheim study? It was kind of unique.
Isn't it like the suicide?
Yep, Durkheim studied suicide, and he found what about suicide?
That people with lower income or
No.
Less social interaction, higher chance of suicide.
Yeah, less social ties led to higher chances of suicide. Good. Okay.
Which one coined the sociology?
Comte. C-O-M-T-E. Okay. Another concept that we talked about, well, actually, let me go through the other two theories before I get to the other stuff. So, functionalism is kind of the first real theory that develops widespread. In part as a backlash to functionalism, what theory developed next? What was the next big theory to develop? Conflict theory. Okay? Conflict theory starts in 1848 after a guy wrote a book called the Communist Manifesto. Who was that guy?
Karl Marx.
Karl Marx. You guys talk about that in history quite a bit as well. So, if you read the Communist Manifesto, like the first line in it says something like, it uses big terminology, big words like hitherto and all that stuff, but it says something like, all of the previous history has been a struggle. You see that terminology, struggle, is kind of a cue that it's probably conflict theory. Has been a struggle between the people that own the means of production and the workers. So he used the terminology, we don't have this on the test, but he uses the terminology, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, if you remember hearing those terms before in history class. So, in conflict theory, is it macro or micro? Wyatt?
Macro.
Macro, okay. And the book definition is something like, it's a theory that analyzes how structures in society work together to produce conflict which leads to change. Okay, they don't necessarily work together from a conflict perspective, but inevitably it'll produce conflict that will lead to some type of change. So the issue of power is a big thing. Conflict theorists assume that people with positions of power will use that power to exploit their position to keep people kind of under them. Okay, so Marx is one of the big guys with that. W.E.B. Du Bois is another one. So it's D-U capital B-O-I-S. Those are kind of the two main ones. Du Bois is kind of an African-American thinker related to theory. Okay, and then the last theory that we talked about obviously was the SI approach. Is that macro or micro? Micro. The two main guys with that were Weber and Mead. So in SI theory, it's going to look at how people create meaning in their everyday social interaction by the exchanging of symbols. So symbol could be anything like a gesture or a wave, communication, language, all of that. So those guys, Weber and Mead, thought that the key to understanding society and beliefs people have and all that is by understanding how people create meaning out of their situations, how that process exactly goes about. All right? Okay. Now, each one of those theories has associated with it a certain type of research. We've got positivist or scientific, interpretive, and critical sociology. Positivist, or sometimes that's called scientific, interpretive, and critical sociology. Critical sociology is most commonly associated with which of the three main theories? Critical sociology is most commonly associated with what? Conflict. Okay? Not always, but most oftenly associated with conflict theory. Okay? Positivist or scientific is most commonly associated with what? Functionalist. And interpretive with what? With SI theory. Think about the definition of SI. It talks about how people create meaning in their social experiences, right? So another word for creating meaning would be interpreting something, how people understand things. Okay? All right. So that's kind of the overview of the theories. Let's move on and talk about Chapter 2, culture. In the text, we talked about 5 different elements of culture. The 5 different elements of culture, those are found on page number 67, if you want to see the summary page. Remember, those are symbols, language, norms, values, and beliefs. These are all related to each other. They all influence each other. But some of them are related a little bit more to each other, like values and beliefs, for example. Okay? So let's take, for example, values and beliefs. What's the key difference between a value and a belief in a culture? What's the difference between a value and a belief in a culture? Lexi.
A value is a broad principle and beliefs are like specific.
Okay? A value is a broad principle that guides people's actions. A belief is a specific application of that principle. So, can somebody give me an example from the U.S. culture of a value and then a corresponding belief? This is that application part. Like, you would see a scenario and you'd have to identify what the value is or what the belief is. There might be a question like that or two questions.
Value nice clothes. So the belief is that if you wear nice clothes, you're a better person, maybe? Is that not?
No, he's on the right track. You probably got a little too specific.
Your value be like spirituality, and then like
Okay. Yeah, a value could be like spirituality or guiding. Everybody should have guiding beliefs or something, and a belief is that like the specific expression of it. I think the example I gave you in class was for a value, the value of attractiveness, right? Okay, that's a value that the U.S. culture has had for a while, but over time, what's considered attractive changes. So watch music videos from the 80s where they present people as attractive, or movies or whatever, and then watch that now and see the difference, right? So that's an example of how those have changed over time, okay? And when it comes to norms, there's two elements to norms, or two different types of norms. I'm guessing that given the Mean Girls assignment, most of you should understand that fairly well. But what's one example of a type of a norm? Lane? Okay, a folkway. And then Andrea, what's another example? Amore. Which one of those two is stronger? Amore. So, don't actually do this right now, but give me an example of a norm violation that would be amore.
Dating your best friend's significant other or ex.
Okay. Yeah, while they're actually dating them, that would be amore. Yeah. So if you two were going out, Lucas and Jordan, and then behind the table, like Max was dating her as well, or under the table, like that'd be Max. That would be bad, right? That'd be amore. Okay. Give me an example of a folkway then.
Shaking hands with your left hand.
Okay, that's the common one I always use. Anything else? Okay, maybe bumping into somebody, standing closer to somebody. Okay, so those would be some examples of amore and a folkway. All right, I think you guys understand that. Talk about. Okay, let's go into some of the specifics then. What's the difference? For Mead and some of the theorists on social interaction, culture, all of that, what's the difference between what they call the significant other and a generalized other? A significant other and a generalized other.
Significant other is like a specific person you know, based on an example, or is it
Yeah, a significant other is somebody that has a key role in your development, your socialization, who you are. So that doesn't mean in the sense of significant other like we think on the street, like your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife, husband, whatever. But a significant other is somebody that has a key role in your life, in your development and your socialization. So teacher, pastor, counselor, coach, father, mother, etc. Boyfriend, girlfriend, brother, sister, those could all be significant others. A generalized other is the term for the collective norms, values, and beliefs that we believe are important in a society. Okay? So another concept we talked about in the class was socialization. What's socialization mean? Not necessarily. A little bit more specific. Okay, socialization is the process of developing, like learning the norms and values of a society and reaching your full potential. Okay? So in class we talked about 4 main agents of socialization. That was when I was gone, if you remember, for my grandma's funeral. So what were the 4 main agents of socialization the text identified?
Elements of personality.
No, you're thinking a little different. That's related, but what were the 4 agents of socialization is the term I should use. What's one? Okay, family's one. School's another. Mass media is another. And then peer group's another. Okay? Good. All right.
Family, school, mass media, and peers.
Okay. What's the difference between high culture and pop culture? Jan.
High culture is like what the rich indulge in, and then pop culture is just like popular.
Yep. High culture is kind of what the elite in a society consume or represent, whereas pop culture is what the average everyday person does in a society. Exactly. Okay? How about the difference between a counterculture and a subculture? Counterculture and a subculture. Presto.
Was like subculture like a part off of
Okay. How about this? Give me an example of a subculture and give me an example of a counterculture. Let's do it that way. Nolan, subculture first.
Like athletics or something.
Okay, could be. Like a mom's homemakers group for stay-at-home moms. That's subculture. Okay. Counterculture would be like the clip that we saw with the vampires, right? Okay. A counterculture is something that goes against the normal expectations of the regular culture. Okay. A subculture is just like a sub-element of the culture of the whole. It doesn't necessarily have to go against the norms of a culture, but some of it could.
So would countercultures be subcultures then as well? Not all countercultures. Not all subcultures.
Right. Yep. Because all countercultures are going to share at least some beliefs with the culture as a whole, but they're going to differ on some of the beliefs, especially some key ones, right? So the vampire culture, right? They probably, if you watch the clip, they believe it's important to have friends, right? Because they all are together, and the one guy's like, I don't drink blood, I don't do this, and then the other guy's like, I do, right? So they accept some of the beliefs, but not all of them. I played that clip in this class, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that's kind of the key stuff for culture. I'm just trying to highlight some of the key parts. Let's go to chapter 3. Chapter 3 stuff is again on socialization. So that summary page is found on page 93. So one of the matching sections has like different stages in development where you have to match their levels. So if you look at the first page of page 93, if you have your book on you right now, it says important contributions to our understanding of socialization. And then it's got Freud, Piaget, Kohlberg, Gilligan, Mead. That page would help you a lot for this section. Okay? So let's take Freud, for example. What were the 3 terms that Freud used for parts of personality?
id, superego, and ego.
Id, ego, superego. What's the one that like wants instant gratification? The id. Which one is the like angel on the shoulder that tries to like balance stuff? Superego. So that's the internalized norms of society. The ego tries to basically get what the id wants through culturally acceptable means. So the ego, like the id, to the id, the 2 main instincts the text talked about, if you remember, was the eros and the thanatos. So the death instinct and the like sexual instinct, basically. So, like the id says, that guy took my cookie, I want to break his neck. Or like, that guy or girl's hot, I want to sleep with them right now. That's what the id says, okay? The superego's like, no, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. The ego is like, how can I like hurt that guy, but in a socially acceptable manner? Or how can I get with that girl, but in a socially acceptable manner? Or how can I deal with these urges, but in a socially acceptable manner? Okay? Make sense? All right, let's go to Piaget. What was Piaget's theory of development? What was that focused on? Yeah, cognitive development. Okay, so there's 4 stages to that. What's the first stage where you just respond to stimulus in your environment? sensory motor, and then the next stage is the pre-operational stage, where you first start using language and symbols. Third one is the concrete operational, and then the fourth one is formal operational. Okay? What's the difference between an ascribed and an achieved status?
Ascribed you're just born with or end up with, and achieved you have to work for.
Yeah, an ascribed status you're born with. Probably should hide this a little better. You guys are seeing the first question. Did you pick that up or not?
I wasn't even paying
Oh, that's
attention
fine.
to that.
I was like, I had it like this before, so.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a test, so.
All of you are,
It's on,
Preston's like,
it's on the camera though,
yeah.
so.
Preston's like, that's at 20 minutes and 10 seconds or whatever. Yeah, that's okay, that was my bad. So, okay. So an ascribed status is a status that you get involuntarily. An achieved status is a status that you pick up through doing something, okay? Should have done this back to back. Oh well. Okay, let's look at some other theorists. What's the theory that says that people create meaning and you can tell what they value based on like the language that they attach to different things? Like the number of words that they have tells you how deep they value it and how deeply they can think about it. Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is correct. Okay.
What is it?
The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. SAPIR and then WHORF. Okay, what's the theory that says what's perceived as real is real in its consequences? W.I. Thomas theorem. Give me an example of an application of the W.I. Thomas theorem.
Like that one video we watched, or was it a super one? With College J. Ripson or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Like the guy's like washing his car the whole time.
Okay.
Colin, maybe, and then like she likes him, and ends up being gay at the end.
Okay. So she perceived in the video that he was like flirting with her or something. So even though she was like totally going off the wall, like falling off the car and whatever. So the perception that he liked her led her to kind of forcing the issue because he smiled at her right at the beginning, whatever. But it turned out that he wasn't interested in her because he was gay. So that'd be an example of the W.I. Thomas theorem. Good. Okay. All right, let me give you some scenarios then to analyze. I'll do that for about 10 minutes and then I'll leave 10 minutes or so for people to ask questions. Okay. If you're a society that is considered androcentric, what does that mean? Androcentric, what does that mean?
Please spell that.
Androcentric. And A-N-D-R-O centric. Yep. Okay, so what does the word centric mean? Centered, like geocentric, if you remember from the Copernicus model of the universe. Or geocentric was Ptolemaic model. Heliocentric was Copernicus, right? So, you know that centric means centered. What does andro mean? That's the question then. It means male. Okay, so if you're androcentric, if your society is that, if you're being critical of a society for being society, I can't talk now, but I'm trying to rap or something. I don't know. It's really bad. Androcentric would be focused too much on male stuff, okay? Okay. Which of the theoretical approaches is most closely tied to like economics or materialism? Yeah, I should have phrased that differently because, for example, conflict talks a lot about money, right? And talks a lot about controlling the means of production. But functionalism talks about how stuff functions as well. So I think it depends on the context of that. So, for example, if the focus is on who controls the materials, then it's conflict theory. If the focus is on how those materials work together in a setting, then it'd be functionalism. All right? Okay. The United States could be considered Eurocentric. Eurocentric. From a multicultural perspective, what would multiculturalists say about the U.S. culture being Eurocentric? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Why? Okay, it's bad. Why?
It's dominated by people of cultural European descent.
Yeah, it's dominated by people of European heritage. And from a multicultural perspective, the more cultures you can draw from, the stronger a society is. Good. Okay, another theorist that was related to SI theorist was a guy named Charles Horton Cooley. Cooley talked about the concept of the looking glass self. The looking glass self. To Cooley, what does the looking glass self refer to? Yeah, a little bit more specific than self-image, but how you think other people see you. So you don't behave just totally out of your own expressions. You behave based on how other people respond to you or what they think. So if you walk up to somebody from Cooley's perspective and you're like, hey, how you doing? And they're pretty good and they're always really positive, then you think, well, I should keep doing that. But if they're always really negative, then you think, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, even if what you're doing is a good thing culturally, or even if they don't really mind it, but you're just interpreting them differently, okay? So for example, you remember that manslater thing I showed you? Where it's are you confused by big words from females or by simple language or whatever? Can I go golfing? Yeah, that's fine, okay? To the guy right away, before he had the manslater, the lady said, that's fine. He's like, cool, it sounds like everything's going well. And then later he gets hit in the face or whatever, okay, slapped or I don't know. So from that perspective of the looking glass self could apply there, in that the guy is behaving based on what he thinks is acceptable, because he looks at his wife and he sees, okay, this is good, this is bad, here's what I should do. But he's not, the manslater is kind of making fun of the fact that he can't pick up those subtle signals. He's not good at seeing the looking glass self. Okay. I'm going to give you some examples of social institutions. I want you to tell me what they are, okay? Mental hospital and prison. What type of social institution is that? A total institution, okay? In a total institution, what's the goal? Yeah, break down their old self and install in them, re-socialize them, basically. In the process of socialization, the text identified a number of different factors that were important for becoming adults. What were some of the key factors in that they talked about? What are the key milestone events in your process of going from being a child to an adult?
Nurture or something, or no?
No, that's part of the process. I mean, events, what do you do that then you're an adult? So your first words make you be an adult? That's scary. My daughter's 2 then, and she's an adult. So, yeah.
Simple ways, in your driver's license.
Okay, he's kind of on the right track. So career, graduating college, marriage. Okay. So which one of those things did the text identify as being the most important thing? Or it's not one of those things, but you guys can look it up. You'll figure it out. It's pretty straightforward. I see it right here on the top of one of the review pages. So I'll give you that hint. But okay. Other concepts we talked about was status and role. I'm going to give you some examples for me, and I want you to tell me what the term is that's related to that thing I give you, okay? So collectively, if I were to say teacher, husband, father, coach, softball player, etc. That's status set. That's all the statuses that I hold, okay? All right. Now, if I were to say protector, leader, breadwinner, garbage taker, outer.
Your roles
I don't
as a mother.
Okay. What's the term for many roles associated with one status? A role set. Okay. So those are all the roles associated with one status. Okay. For I'm trying to think of an example. Nolan right now, soccer player could be this for him.
Athlete.
Well, status, but what type of status? Master status. I don't know for sure, but that could be for him right now. Okay? So during state soccer probably is going to be, right? February 20th for Preston, right around that time, what's going to be your master status?
Wrestling.
Wrestler. Okay? May 29th, 30th, your master status for half of you roughly in here is going to be what? Graduate, yeah. That's going to be a thing that shapes your life the most for that. Okay? Did you say dropout?
That's what I thought you were implying.
You said over half, or a little over half of us.
Well, half of you are juniors and half are seniors, right? So, you get it? Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at this page. Like, this whole page of the test is all applying the 3 different theories in sociology. So I give you a scenario, and then you have to pick which theory it most relates to. One of the theories that we talked about a little bit in class was ethnomethodology. You remember that? So how do people in that theory try to figure out like what's right or wrong in a society? Remember? Ethnomethodology.
Is that where they did
Common sense?
surveys?
They do what?
Isn't it by common sense? Is that what you're asking?
Yep, part of it's common sense, but how do they find stuff out using common sense?
They break rules of society and
They-
see what happens.
Yeah, they break rules in society and see how people respond. Yeah, the clip I showed was the escalator. So there are 3 guys on the escalator, 2 of them were in on it, 1 wasn't. So the 2 in the front like turn around backwards, and the other guy looks around and he turns around the other way also. So the silly example I usually give for that is like walk through the hall and take really big steps once and see how people respond. What are the other 2 other theories I talked about? Sure. Dramaturgy is another one we discussed. So dramaturgy, which is that theory, is that macro or micro? Micro, because it analyzes small things. Remember the guys in the room? On stage, backstage, off stage, that stuff. Okay? So in dramaturgy, it basically uses the analogy of a play. Okay. What type of group would like your family be? Primary group is one term for it. What else could your family be? In group or an out group? In group. Okay? So this group right here, what could this be called? This could be an in group also. Okay? Or a secondary group. Okay? Secondary group tends to be larger and tends to be focused on what? Getting something done. Exactly. Okay? All right. The group that you like look at and try to base your life off of, or try to figure out like what you should do, what group is that?
Reference group.
Reference group. Good.
So like the Packers are like an in group, and the Bruins would be like an out group.
Right. Or even within West Fargo High School, like the soccer team could be an in group, and the football team to you would be the out group. Okay, but to Preston, in group for football players, you're the out group, soccer players out.
Football guy.
Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean bad again, but it could be. It just depends on the situation. Okay. Okay. If you remember, one of the studies we talked about with conformity was the shock study. Who was the guy that did the shock study? Stanley Milgram. Okay. And what were they trying to assess in the shock study?
How obedient people will be to authority figures.
Yep, how obedient people will be to authority figures. What was another one of the research studies assessing? The one with the lines. Yeah, they were assessing how strong people would conform with a group, just for the sake of being like with the group. So the example was show 3 lines, and then show another line that's just a little bit apart, but that clearly matches one of the lines, and ask a person, let's say that it's Andrea, which line is it? And then she goes like 10th in the group though, right? So then I ask 9 other people what is it, and you're all in on it, you lie and say that it's really one that's not the right answer, and we want to see if she'll match you, just so she doesn't have to go against you, okay? That was the Solomon-Asch study.
Wait, so is that kind of like F9 methodology?
No, not necessarily. 'Cause they're not intentionally breaking. They are like doing something different, they're aligned, but the person doesn't know about it. Yep. Okay, the other thing on this page, I see there's a scenario with like a person, and it gives you a whole bunch of statuses, and you have to identify what the role, the status, role set, status set, etc. are. Okay? So I just did that for me. You should be able to apply that fairly easy. Okay. One of the theorists that talked about death and dying in socialization was a lady named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Her theory on death and dying had 5 stages to it that you can remember with the acronym DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. What's the first stage? Like if you find out you're going to die, you got real bad cancer or whatever, what's the first stage? Denial. Then the A is? Anger. Okay. Then bargaining. So that's kind of a religious model, but please Lord, don't let me die, etc. Then the next one?
Die.
Depression. And then the last one's acceptance. We also talked about leadership styles in class. Democratic, authoritarian, and laissez-faire. So be able to identify those and what the strengths and weaknesses are of those, etc. Democratic, authoritarian, and laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is like no leader. Democratic is shared power. Authoritarian is one person makes all the decision. Let's see. The essay is on bureaucracy, but there are a few questions about bureaucracy as well, so make sure you know elements of a bureaucracy. And that's pretty much it. Okay? Oh, also know the difference between like groups and crowds as well. Okay? And a cohort too. So what makes something a group? You have to have more than one person, obviously. People have to identify with each other and interact for a purpose. Those 3 elements.
What's a cohort?
Cohort is like high school seniors, like people that share the same status. Okay? And a crowd are like, if we were all sitting here eating separately, it'd be like group, I'm lonely, group, okay? Like that. But then if we start interacting together, then we could become a group. So the example that the text uses, hopefully this doesn't happen, but somebody walks in the door with a gun and says, I'm going to kill you all, you suck, whatever. Like, so we're going to work together and try to take that guy out, right? So you would laugh. Some dude comes in with a shotgun, I'm going to kill you all, you suck, you'd laugh. I think you'd get shot first. Okay. With the shock theory, or the study, Stanley Milgram. Okay. Any other questions? Specific questions?
All right, so your example for
It's not everything. There's some that I skipped intentionally because I'm not going to go over everything on the test. But if you look at the review sheet and you watch this, or you should be fine. Study your notes, all that. I try to make it as difficult as a college test because you get college credit for it, and I want you guys to see what it's like. So this is going to be, harder than the world history test, but not like substantially hard. If you've taken AP US History, AP Government, this isn't. I don't think this would be as hard as those tests. Like AP Government or AP US History. So no, I'd say like I don't know, AP Government, AP US History are like here, and then like government tests are here. This one's probably a little bit harder than the typical regular government test. But
so your example for the ethnomethodology was two guys turned around in the escalator, and the guy who wasn't involved turned around.
yeah, ethnomethodology is a micro-level theory that tries to assess how people create meaning out of their situations. It's an offshoot of SI theory. And the way they try to analyze that is by intentionally breaking like norms. And then they see how people respond. And that kind of helps you to figure out the rules of behavior. Yep.
What did Kohlberg do again?
Kohlberg was the moral development. So it's pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. At the pre-conventional level, that's like typically younger kids. What's good is what feels good. At the conventional level, what's good is what fits with like the rules. And at the post-conventional level, what's good is what fits some abstract principles that you hold dear as an individual. And that's all on the summary page too. Anybody else?
So
Good
do you have
stuff.
to know the person who did the line study?
There's names in there. If you know the names, it would help. You don't always have to know the names, but if you do know the